Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday, October 19th, day 603 of Vladimir Putin's strategically inept 3-day military special operation. Um, I always like to remind people that it literally was a 3-day special military operation, and the lead elements of the tank column, the armored column that was heading towards Kiev, the lead elements of those columns, they not only didn't pack enough food or water, etc., for more than a week, they also packed their dress uniforms because they were going to go on parade in downtown Kiev or Hostomel Airport or something like that, as they were welcome as victors. So, just a little reminder of how poorly things have gone. So what I'm going to start off with, as always, today, I'm going to cover off Russia's military losses for the last 24 hours. Then I'm going to talk to you about the Dnieper River, the Kherson Oblast, the additional push across by the Ukrainian forces, and point out to you possibly the most important intersection, literally not a metaphorical or whatever intersection, a literal street intersection, a highway intersection that is probably the most important intersection in Ukraine at the moment, from a Russian logistics and a Ukrainian strangle point of view. So, to get started with, over the last 24 hours. So things, I thought really things were going to kind of culminate in the Avdiivka area. Reports indicate that the Russians haven't quite given up the ghost yet. They are still pushing in the Avdiivka area, with less, I would say, fervor, less equipment, still less armor, more men. Um, but they are still losing men in the northeast area, which is of Avdiivka. Um, so they lost 630 men over the last 24 hours. It's not as bad as, the worst days of just shy of 1,100. And it's a lot worse than some of the best days of like the 300s, 380s, that sort of thing. 11 tanks is slightly above average. It's a good day for the Ukrainians to take out 11 tanks. I didn't see a lot of visuals. I know they're around, but I didn't come across the visual confirmations. I can't tell you the mix if they're T90s, T80s, T55s. I have no idea, but typically you're seeing some of the more modern tanks, the T80 BVMs, that sort of thing, with cope cages on them, getting taken out on a regular basis. So it seems to be the slightly more modern variants of the tanks that they have been that they're losing. 17 armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles. That APV is, like I've said before, it's a combination of all of the different types of. Some of them carry a couple of guys, and heavy machine guns and anti-tank missiles on top. Some of them have next to no offensive weaponry whatsoever, and they're basically a battle taxi or a troop carrier, and they carry 2 crew and 8 soldiers. So it's a mixture. Just kind of wanted to recap that for new listeners or people that are not quite familiar what falls into the APV bucket. 39 artillery systems, which is very good. It's nowhere close to the most, believe it or not. They broke 91, I think it was the highest number, which is insane. But 39 artillery systems in a day is fantastic. 4 MLRS is actually more impressive. They're not as common. They're very difficult to track down. The Russians protect them. And to get 4 MLRS, well, MLRS are capable of launching 72 or less rockets into into a fairly dense area, like a 1 kilometer squared area sort of thing. So to take those out, they're expensive, especially if it's the TOS thermobaric flamethrowers. I love seeing those taken out. I do not know which ones were taken out. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, which is fantastic. 1 aircraft. So that aircraft was yet another Su-25. I call it the flanker. I think it's the Su-27. Officially got the first name flanker, but Su-25 is basically like a sort of a thick, beefy, multi-role ground support, close air combat aircraft. Close air combat, close air support. Making up just military terms out of my butt. So what that kind of tells me is one, there's a Russian mandate out there to provide air cover for some of these offensive operations that the ground troops have been taking on. Two, it might tell me that in certain areas the Ukrainians have been creative again and possibly snuck some of their anti-aircraft systems, such as an Iris, a SAMP-T, the radar for a Patriot, that sort of thing. They've snuck something up closer to the border, to the combat border, and basically are taking out these planes. Could very well be man pads, could be anything else, but that just my sense when you see 4 Su-25s taken out in the space of 7 days, something has changed. And the Ukrainians did show in the past, if you remember in the Northeast, where the Russians lost 4 helicopters in 1 day, in like an hour. After the fact, the Ukrainians sources basically said they moved the Patriot battery, or portions of the Patriot battery, the radar system and launchers, closer to the front line in the Northeast, because they got wind of a pending attack, and they basically wiped out these air assets and then moved it back. So you can move Patriots around. You can break them down and set them back up, sometimes in 3 days or less, depending on how far they're moving. So anyways, so 1 aircraft, 1 helicopter. I think that a helicopter was just another confirmation of one of the runway kills, which was great. In the airbase, brought that helicopter, I think, brings the confirmed from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense to 8, but I think I've seen smudge marks on the tarmac on the runway in the Berdyansk airport that basically shows 9. Apparently it was 4 Mi-8, which are kind of like transport, heavy lift type helicopters, and 5 K-52, which are their most modern attack helicopters. So anyways, good news. 17 UAVs, which is fine. Nothing special about that. And Elon Musk did say that please subscribe to my X channel as well as my YouTube channel, or he will charge you $1 for your membership. It's just what he does. So subscribe to my channels and save yourself $1. Okay, so I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, and it's very hard to put a cohesive message together about what's going on in Dnipro, the Kherson Oblast, the crossing of the Dnipro by more Ukrainian troops. Just a little bit of a history lesson too. So the Dnipro River, and I'm going to throw a little bit of shade at some awesome creators in the past and take everything with a grain of salt, because I make more mistakes. I make mistakes just like everybody else does. But in the past, going back to before the Novokakhovka Dam was blown up, some very large, reputable, credible channels, etc., sources, military sources, ex-generals or whatever, were saying that the Ukrainians would not cross the Dnipro, and that the Kherson front, if you want to call it that, was kind of like a dead stick. It was basically a non-event. It was never going to happen. Ignoring the fact that the Ukrainians throughout the entire war have crossed every single river, large and small, and other bodies of water, including portions of the Black Sea. They've crossed them at will. They have barges and boats of all sizes and shapes. They have the confidence, the know-how, the planning, the training, the experience. They have bridge building. They have pontoons that can, motorized pontoons. They have pontoon bridges, etc. They have crossed rivers in daylight under the noses of the Russians. They have crossed entire platoons and more back and forth across the rivers in Lysychansk and Severodonetsk and places like that. They've gone back and forth across the river, and certain experts who say that they're not military experts, and then in the next sentence go ahead and tell you how badly the military is done and what they should do, such as don't cross a certain river, don't hang on to Bakhmut, etc. Get the U.S. to come in and run their military, do investigations, whatever. Some of these creators are they put in a little bit of a caveat to say, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not a military expert. And then, however, what they should do, what I would do, why this is wrong and why this is terrible and why the Ukrainians are failing. And I sure hope they don't make more mistakes like this. Like, give me a break. That to me is kind of speaking out of both sides of your mouth. If you're not a military expert and you claim and you're stating that on the outset, don't then follow that up with wanting to court-martial military leaders for possibly mistakes in your eyes, or saying that the Dnipro is uncrossable, or saying that Bakhmut should not be held. Right? Stick to flying, like driving trucks, or I don't know, flying passenger planes or that sort of thing. If that's in your wheelhouse, but if you're going to confidently tell tens or hundreds of thousands of your followers that something is not possible, or the military is failing or doing something wrong, that can have a bleed over effect into what the Ukrainian troops see and hear on the front line, because your followers are also their family members, their friends, whatever, that are looking for news. Since the Novokakhovka Dam was blown up and then the floodwaters came down the Dnipro, a lot of other people who were kind of on the fence said, okay, now the Dnipro is never crossable. It can't be crossed. Don't worry about Kherson. It's not happening. It's too difficult. That to me was mind-boggling. That such reputable channels and people, etc., would say that a one-time couple of day flood event was going to take a massive front of the Ukraine battle off of the map and basically make it impossible for them to cross over. It was somehow going to create these floodwaters, like biblical floodwaters that were going to just protect the Russian flank, and they're never going to have to worry about it again. Kind of ridiculous if you think about it. The floodwaters receded, the land dried out, the river is at a lower level than it was before, and the Ukrainians have shown, as I'm showing on the map here, all of these yellow areas in the Dnipro area are contested and have been for weeks, if not months, by Ukrainians crossing over and taking island after island after island. They've gone into areas that the Russians didn't think was possible, and they've done it easily. And the OPSEC has been very, very, there's been a tight lid on it as far as saying how many people are there, what area they hold, whatever. But it's safe to say that the Ukrainians not only have a lot of troops on the east bank or the left side of the Dnieper River, but more and more are coming lately. So I just wanted to basically kind of point that out to you, that, and again, don't believe anything that I say, don't believe anything that anyone else says. It should all be indicative of something greater, right? So if you hear 4 or 5 different mainstream media channels, 4 or 5 different YouTube creators, etc., all saying the same sort of thing, hopefully the YouTube creators are ahead of the curve and saying that providing that information to you quicker. But at the same time, question it. If someone says that Dnipro cannot be crossed, look at Zaluzhny. Look at a guy like Zaluzhny and Budanov and Zelensky, etc., and you tell those guys to their face that they can't do it when they've done everything that they've put their mind to, pretty much. So that being said, The Dnipro can be crossed. The Dnipro is being crossed, and I have been pounding the table and screaming from the rooftops, etc., for months and months and months that this will be a major front for the Ukrainians. If the Novokakova Dam hadn't been blown, I think the Ukrainians were ready to go across the river. On June 6th, they blew it. They blew the dam. The Russians blew the dam and basically delayed things by weeks. But at the same time, they did not stop things from happening that the Ukrainians had planned, which was draw the Russian forces away into various other areas of conflict, tie them down, fix them in place in the Opitny and other places like that. And basically, it's kind of like a reverse Bakhmut, right? In the east, if you're able to bring those Russian troops in, get them stuck in trenches and fortifications, that sort of thing, pin them down with artillery, and basically fix them in place. That's called a shaping operation. You've now shaped the battlefield. Where did those troops come from? Well, they came from the Kherson Oblast. They came from the Dnipro River, because the Russians and a lot of YouTube creators and experts, etc., all said this river is like a barrier, and we don't need troops over here. We're going to bring them over to fight the Ukrainians elsewhere. So to me, this is a brilliant strategy. Like I said, it's Bakhmut in reverse. Get them to put their best troops over into other areas, fix them in place, open up this battlefield, and this battlefield is open. There are very few revetments, almost no Dragon's Teeth, almost no trenches, very few Russian military brigades protecting what is a large swath of land, and this is the lowest density of Russian troops in the battle space today. So, that being said, obviously it's in the news that the Ukrainians are crossing over in greater and greater numbers. Now I've heard, well, the special forces have crossed over the Dnipro. Well, yeah, the special forces cross over the Dnipro every single day. They've had a foothold, bridgeheads, etc., across the Dnipro for months, a couple of months now. So to say that the special forces are crossing over is not new information. When you say the Marines are crossing over, or when you start to say potentially regular troop concentrations are crossing over, that is the news, because those are heavier, typically heavier mechanized, less mobile, but more permanent kind of troops that are moving across the river. That is happening. I wanted to point this little intersection out for you right here, which is the M14, M17 intersection. So I made my nice little arrows in a circle to show you this. This basically is the Antonovsky rail bridge, and the Ukrainians have now come across here in greater and greater numbers. And the M14, M17 highway, it's not great on this map, but I'm going to get rid of this pretty arrows in a circle. And I'm going to zoom out a bit. And you guys can also tell me too, like there's this map, right, which kind of shows it a little bit better. I don't know. And then, is this map? That one sucks. Which one? What was the other one I wanted to look at? There's this one which puts the roads in white. I kind of stuck on this one as my favorite because it kind of makes it orange, but I know it's not great, especially if you got any sort of color blindness issues, whatever. But so the Ukrainians, here's Oleshki, and the Ukrainians are pushing across hard around the Oleshki area. And the reason why I wanted to point out this highway, you see this intersection here, right? So if you back this out and you look at this supply road, comes all the way along here, the M14 and the M17, like this, right? So picture the Russians trying to keep this area supplied. Now, where are your supplies coming from? They're coming along this highway, or they're coming down here from, let's say, a port city or whatever, and then up here, right? Or they're coming from Crimea and following either that branch or this branch all the way over here. But if you want to hold this coastline, is it proper? Riverbank coastline? If you want to hold this this area, You need to keep these guys supplied down here. You need to keep any units supplied over here. And all along here from this intersection here, right? This there's an intersection there, there, and there. But all the way from this area here to right over here, you can see the only way to get any beans, bullets, etc. to these troops in here is either along the road there, along the road here, connects up, or along the road there. But they all join up and then take a hard jog straight to the riverbank before coming back out again. So if you can take Oleshki and take this intersection, you have basically cut off all east-west travel, all east-west supplies, ground lines of communication. That is why the Ukrainians are pushing there. That is why right now this is the most important strategic intersection in Ukraine, bar none. You take this, then all of a sudden the guys here have to be fed from this area, or the guys, over here have to be fed from all the way over here, right? If you can take Oleshki and you can take that intersection, and then you can move slightly up the highway, about 10 kilometers up the highway, and you can take that one as well, you've now cut off this entire roadway this way as well. It's probably under fire control as it is, but to physically take control of these roads, now all of a sudden people that are here, for example, the only place they're going to get resupplied from is over here, right? It's just one direction. So I wanted to point that out to you. And back to my little diatribe before about the Ukrainians crossing waterways, that sort of thing. This is the Kinburn Peninsula. This is the Kinburn Spit. You may recall months ago, early summer, I don't know, there was a video released on purpose by the Ukrainian Special Forces, and they had a couple of Humvees, I believe, on barges, boats, whatever you want to call them, and they were crossing this waterway and claimed that they were going out to the Kinburn Spit. So if they can cross a waterway like this, they can cross a river. Okay, I'll try to stay off my soapbox. This is from Chuck Farr. He puts these busy maps together, but packs tons of information in them. Ukrainian forces are maintaining a lodgment east of Oleshki. Contact reported along the rail right of way at Pishanivka and Poima. So that's the rail line that we were talking about before. There's Oleshki, there's the M14, M17 intersection, right? There's the M14 here, M17 there. And this is apparently where one of the pushes is coming from. Ukrainian forces are maintaining a presence on the south bank near the Antonivsky rail bridge. Russian artillery strikes have been... Russian artillery strikes hot railway bridge. I'm not quite sure what he means by that. Hot as in like it's actively being fought over. Ukraine forces maintain the lodgment. Like I said, Ukraine forces have staged significant crossings of the Dnieper River east of the rail crossing. Initial reports indicate Ukrainian forces as far south as Poima. So there's Poima there. Poima is 3.5 kilometers from the riverbank. So basically they're saying that the Ukrainians have pushed in 3.5 kilometers. There's Chuck also pointing out the important M14, M17. This right here, and here's a little close-up of it, are the Russian artillery strikes. So if these are confirmed, geo-confirmed. So if Russia is striking an area with artillery, that means their troops are typically not there, and the Ukrainians are. So that's kind of like, that's what Andrew Perpetua uses. It's kind of like a reverse confirmation. The absence of Russians equals the presence of Russian artillery equals the presence of Ukrainian troops. Therefore, you can kind of extrapolate those to then basically assume that the Ukrainians have made advancements all the way to the edge of Poima, which is fantastic. I think that's it for this one. So here is basically about the landing on the left bank of the Dnipro. So the Kherson Russian sources told this is. So I'll basically read these off to you. These are Russian sources. Sometimes they're the best sources because they get on a radio or a phone and they say, "Oh my God, we're getting our butt kicked," right? Which the Ukrainian intelligence services, etc., will say nothing to see here yet. The Dnipro offensive initial results. The Ukrainian armed forces capitalized on significant advantage in reconnaissance capabilities, capturing valuable officers and documents. They effectively utilized combat drones as fully independent means of warfare. They skillfully choose strike locations where it's easiest to land and establish a foothold. So basically, they use drones, intelligence, ISR, etc., and they're like, oh, look, there's nobody in that little 1 kilometer space on the edge of the riverbank. That's where we're going to land. They leveraged the advantage of high bank, weak support from the Russian Federation, and a large response capability. High right bank. So the right bank of the Dnieper River, where they're coming from, it's actually raised up above the left bank, which gives them an even better advantage from a visual, reconnaissance, even arc of your weapon, etc. Capability. Finally, they successfully used the poor tactical equipment of platoons companies with observation tools and drones. They use the poor tactical equipment of platoons companies with observation tools and drones. I think that's lost in translation. It's basically saying the Russian equipment sucks and the Ukrainian equipment is good. At this point, they've managed to establish themselves on the beachhead. Well, yeah, that's... it's kind of annoying because they've had a beachhead established for months. They're just expanding it and adding to it and adding more in different spots. They're permanently across the Dnipro. Estimates. I'm making up words. Experts at the Institute for the Study of War, which is an independent U.S. think tank, have suggested that Ukraine Marines have advanced on the occupied bank of the Dnieper River and that Russians are concerned about the possibility of a larger scale Ukrainian operation in the Kherson Oblast. So that's from the ISW. Also from the ISW, just kind of more confirmation of what we've been talking about. Blue is either water and or held Ukrainian space. And again, this is just kind of like a less busy visualization of the new bridgehead. This doesn't really do it justice. This is very sort of safe, timid, whatever you want to call it, because that basically shows the width of the bridgehead, but we know that the actual depth of the bridgehead is moving further and further inland, at least 3.5 kilometers, and that is at least 24 hours old, so they could be a lot further inland. War Monitor. Ukrainian artillery counter battery fire hit and destroyed a rocket artillery firing position of Russian forces across the Dnieper River in the forest belt near Obrivka. As a result, a BM-21 Grad was destroyed. So I don't have visual confirmation of this, but you can basically see how far inland that strike has apparently taken place. So they've clearly got counter battery radar, drones, etc. set up, and they're able to identify where Grad was and take it out. So here's where the Novokakhovka Dam was, and everything else we're talking about is further over here. Here's the biggest sand trap in the world. And here's where the Grad was. So it's basically northeast of what I was just showing you at the start of the video. So taking out a Grad is nothing special. It almost happens, every couple of days. But at the same time, it shows you that the Ukrainians are not just a one and done. It's not just a light reconnaissance. If they're actively taking out artillery, MLRS, that sort of thing, it can mean greater things to come, possibly. From Arturehi, who has come around and basically said he was one of the ones who basically said that early on he stated that the Dnipro was uncrossable and was not going to be a threat, and has basically kind of undone his thinking on that, or changed his thinking on that. And I believe in a stream yesterday said he's got to rethink it, and it's a possibility, which is great to hear. Welcome to the dark side. Dnipro left bank, the enemy released a video showing the advance of the Ukrainian armed forces to the western settlement of, of Pershavivka on the Dnipro's left bank. The circumstances are being made clear, are being clarified. So you can see how far in that is, and this is a real potatoey image, and I apologize, that's as large as it gets, but this basically is looks like long distance drone, or maybe one of those observation posts of Ukrainian forces. There's the river, there's the islands, the contested area. Here's Russian held territory, and this is inside Russian held territory, and they show that there are Ukrainian troops have already advanced. And then here a little geez, words. A little further along on the time scale, whatever, you see this Russian area here that was held is completely gone now. Focus on that little white line there, which I don't know if that's a waterway or something like that. But anyways, now you can see it's in the contested area. And the spot where the Ukrainian troops were spotted here in previously held Russian territory is now uncontested. So they moved all the way back. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a substantial amount, right? Next up, the video quality. I mean, we need to get better quality drones all over it's like the red-haired stepchild over there. The drones suck, the camera sucks, but the good stuff's happening. An overview of the daily events in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In the occupied parts of the Kherson region, Ukrainian troops carried out operations. Some Russian media speak of a breakthrough. So there's the Dnipro, there's the rail bridge, there is another little, I forget the name of this little river that crosses just to the south east of the Dnipro, but then you can see an explosion there. And then here, you can see some Ukrainian troops being observed from a horrible quality camera, probably from distance, but basically they're walking out in the open in broad daylight. So this is not a special operations night operation, special forces night operation. Yeah. Jumping away from there, this is just a little interesting article. I didn't do a deep dive into this, but I thought it was interesting that this tender, the Russian offensive at Kupiansk, which is in the Far East, which I believe was a diversion, is not only losing steam, but is actively getting rolled back. Zinkivka, which was partially taken by Russian forces, has been re-liberated and the Russian troops thrown back to the MS Pearce area. So you guys might remember where this is, but it's basically in the very, very Far East. The Russians were pushing hard. This was one of the areas where they supposedly had 100,000 troops and all those tanks or whatever, and they took a nice little chunk. Well, the Ukrainians have now taken that chunk back and pushed them back to their previous lines, if not further back. So, as I kind of thought and others thought, the East was a distraction. But then the Ukrainians have also used the South and the East as a distraction as well to pull Russian troops away from Kherson, in my personal opinion. Last thing that I wanted to show you, this is kind of a good news story. It sucks to see, but it's a good news story. The Ukrainian anti-corruption task force continues to track down anybody who's scamming, dodging, whatever. If you stop money from going to Ukraine, if you take money from Ukraine, if you blackmail, if you whatever it happens to be, you're no better than the Russians. So here is a platoon commander was detained in Dnipro who demanded a bribe of 600,000 was from subordinates, threatened with problems in the service and obstacles in receiving money for the performance of combat tasks, DPR. So basically it sounds like what he was saying is, if you want to get your bonus, if you want to get your combat pay, if you want to get this and this, you're going to be paying me. And this guy thought that he could hold this over a group of people and they're not going to pick up the phone and call the fraud police. There he is. Piece of garbage. You're a piece of garbage. You're hurting your frontline troops. You're hurting your combat effectiveness. You're hurting your morale. You're hurting your country. you're no better than somebody who's calling in Russian airstrikes on Ukrainian positions, or stopping money from flowing to Ukraine, to the Ukrainian troops, or to the military equipment. Look at all the stacks of cash this guy was caught with in his car. They're counting it out in public so everybody could see it. He had backpacks full of cash, backpacks and boxes full of cash. And no, it wasn't payday for the commander. That's not how you get paid. That's not how you travel around with your paycheck. Anyways, that's it. Hope you guys didn't mind the rabbit hole, the diatribe, the soapbox, that sort of thing. But I will continue to say it, and I hope you believe me when I say it. Don't believe anything that I say. Don't believe anything that anyone else says without verifying. If you can verify the facts and you're getting reliable information, then you start to trust that information more and more. And I'm not saying other YouTube creators or anybody else are bad people or intentionally mislead you, that sort of thing. Most are very, very amazing people. They have huge channels. They're doing a great job. They're raising tons of money, that sort of thing. But a lot of the times we get stuck in the same rut. We all do. It's groupthink. And one person, one large channel or a couple large channels says something can be done or something can't be done. The Dnipro can't be crossed. And then all of a sudden everybody else says, okay, well, if so-and-so with 600,000 followers says the Dnipro can't be crossed, then it can't be crossed. I'm going to tell my followers that too. Now there's two people saying the same thing with no justification. If you talk to Zaluzhny, you talk to Zelensky, you talk to Budanov, you talk to anybody else, they'll be like, we could land on the moon if you give us 6 months. The Dnipro's nothing. We'll cross it when we want it. It's our territory. And when we cross it, you'll know about it. That's my point, right? So I hope I didn't come across too harsh or whatever, but I really, really, really want people to question what they hear, to validate what they hear. And for those of us that do have an audience, whether it's 30 or 300,000 or more, we have a responsibility to back up what we say and to correct ourselves when we're wrong. And I think that's starting to happen now with the Dnipro. So watch this space, because I think that's where the magic is going to happen. Oh yeah, one thing that I didn't say too. I meant to go into it. I knew I wasn't going to have time. The average rainfall in southern Ukraine is much lower than northern Ukraine. The irrigation levels in the Kherson Oblast and Crimea are nothing now with the Novokakhovka Dam down. What does that mean? There is not going to be those black mud, squishy, impossible areas to pass in southern Kherson and Crimea. Do you know why? Because they're deserts. Without the irrigation, they basically turn into deserts and they're not arable farmland. So when you hear people say that winter's coming and it's basically all going to stop, you might want to question that and check the weather report and check the annual precipitation per area in Ukraine. In southern Ukraine, even when it rains, that water is not being retained as much because of the soil composition, sand, that sort of thing. So military operations can carry on all winter long with the Novokakhovka Dam down and no irrigation, because that is basically it's turning into a hard-packed desert. And you're going to see next year, if the dam is not reconstituted, if irrigation doesn't start, the farmlands in that area are just going to basically be dust bowls. So bad news, the dam's down. Good news, the dam is down. There's no irrigation, and a lot of that land is going to be passable all winter long. So that's why it makes sense to get your bridgeheads across the Dnipro now and basically use that as the new front in the wintertime where the Russians can't travel to it. And you basically got your pickings of where you want to go. And cutting off Crimea is a job number one. That is my last soapbox diatribe. Have a great day. Slava Ukraini.